Hey, Book Dragons, I'm glad you joined me. Whether you're new or returning, welcome, welcome. Today I am talking to you about genres that I do not read. And yeah, some of these may be a little controversial. I don't know. But there's just a few that I really don't care for. And there are caveats to some of these, and we'll get into that. So I'm gonna put my eyes on because I've got my list here. Not that I don't know what I don't read, but just in case. The first one we're going to start off with, I think, is probably the most obvious about my channel, and that is that I do not read romance. I don't mind books with romantic elements in them, but I don't read straight romance. You're never going to catch me reading a Harlequin romance novel, anything like that. It's just not my thing. Romantasy also. I don't read romantasy. I really don't care for it. And you may be wondering how I define romantasy. I define romantasy as a romance book that happens to have fantastical elements in it. Whereas with fantasy novels that just happen to have some romance in them, they're still primarily fantasy. They're books that you read because you want to read fantasy, not because you want to read romance. So that's my take on romantasy, and pretty much anything, if romance is the primary plot line, it's not gonna click with me. So, the next genre I want to mention is westerns. I don't read westerns. I don't even watch westerns. There have been one or two in my life that I've enjoyed, but on the whole, I don't really get into westerns at all. Now, there is a caveat here, and that is the Dark Tower series. And the Dark Tower isn't really a western, but one of the big through lines of the series is a western element. Roland is a gunslinger. He carries 6 shooters. He wears the cowboy hat and the long duster and things like that. So it does have kind of that western element, but that's not the primary focus of the story. So again, kind of like with romance, I don't mind it if there's some elements of westerns, but I really don't care for westerns in general. For the longest time, I thought I would really not like Flintlock fantasy because it's kind of that type of story, but lately the Flintlock fantasy that I've read, namely Mistborn Era 2, has been pretty good, honestly. So I've got nothing to complain about there, I guess. But westerns in general just isn't my thing. You would never catch me reading Lonesome Dove, for instance. And I know that has gotten kind of a resurgence on BookTube, and that's awesome. I love it. If there's people out there that like Lonesome Dove and books like it, that's amazing, and I love it. Just not for me. The next one on this list is real-life memoirs or biographies. Not really my thing. Several years back, when the Steve Jobs biography came out, I was interested to pick it up because Steve Jobs is a fascinating person to me, and I read about maybe 30%, and I DNF'd it. And, I've read other biographies, and they just really didn't spark my interest, so I'm like, I don't know. I know there's a really popular one out there, Patrick Stewart's memoirs were just released a few months back, and I love Patrick Stewart. He's a fascinating person, just a wonderful human being. Do I want to read his memoir? Not really. It's just not for me. Could I maybe do it on audiobook? Sure. It might work better for me that way, but I really have no interest. So I'll watch a documentary about somebody all night long, but books that are about somebody's real life, I'm not interested in. I read for the escape, and whether it's escaping my life or somebody else's real life, that's what I prefer. So yeah. The next one on this list is kind of related to that topic, and that's real life history, historical events. And for this one, I want to specifically say modern history, even more specifically U.S. history. Kind of bores me, guys. I'm sorry. I appreciate the value that history has for our world, but it bores the socks off me. It really does. Now, you give me ancient world history like Egypt and Mesopotamia, ancient Rome, I eat that stuff up. Although I still prefer to watch a documentary on that as opposed to reading a book. But I will read a book. I do have some reference books on stuff like that. So I'm not opposed to reading ancient history, but I am definitely opposed to reading any kind of modern history. I'm just books about the Civil War and different things like that. I'm like, sorry, I don't like it. So I really won't ever be caught reading a World War II history book or anything like that. And then kind of along with that is historical fiction. Now, there are exceptions to this. I read and thoroughly enjoyed The Warlord Chronicles by Bernard Cornwell, and that is about the Arthurian myth. And maybe that's why I was kind of drawn to that one, is because it's more myth than actual history. We don't really know a lot about Arthur, or even if Arthur existed, but it was written in such a way that Arthur was surrounded by actual historical events happening. So I don't know. I enjoyed it though. I am really interested in reading Shogun, primarily because I've started watching the show and I'm like, oh, this is good. So it kind of makes me want to read the book. And, you know, Shogun is based on historical events, not necessarily 100% accurate, right? But it's still fiction. But it really has me intrigued to read that. So there are some exceptions, but as a general rule, I really don't read historical fiction. So that's my list, guys. Let's see, we've got 5 genres that I don't read. And there's a lot of genres out there, even more if you count subgenres. So, you know, I'm pretty well read with these exceptions, right? Will you cut me a pass on this? Let me know in the comments below what you think of my list of genres that I do not read. And until next time, guys, make sure you're reading more books, and I will talk with you soon. And I'd like to give a huge shout out to my patrons. I really appreciate all you do to support my channel. Thank you so much for what you do.